All right. Welcome to the Anchorage School District's pre-boarding of school board candidates. My name is Tiffany Jackson. I'm the Director of Membership Services for the Association of Alaska School Boards. And I'm so happy to be with you all this evening. Just a little information on me so you know who I am. I was on my local school board for 12 years. I was also on the board of directors for the Association of Alaska School Boards, and I served twice as president of the association. And I served for, I think, 4 years on the National School Boards Association board of directors. So I come to you with a bit of knowledge on what it takes to be a school board member. I joined the Association of Alaska School Boards as staff in January of last year. So now I get to continue my work with school boards and training. And I just want to say I'm so glad that Anchorage is doing these webinars for potential school board candidates. I think they are so great. What a wonderful idea. I know when I first ran for the school board back in 2007, I ran not really knowing what it meant to be a school board member. And I just, when they asked if we'd be interested in helping with the webinars, I was like, yes, absolutely. This is a wonderful idea. Anything we can do to help people be prepared as you start your new journey as a candidate for the school board. So this evening's webinar is going to be covering board conduct and Robert's Rules of Order. Just some little housekeeping things as we get started. This is a webinar, so you won't be able to see the other participants in the room with us, but we do have a Q&A function at probably on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions while I'm presenting, go ahead and type those questions into the Q&A. I will work to monitor the Q&A while I'm presenting and try to address them in a timely manner as they come up. If not, if I don't get to a question, but your name is in there, I will try to follow up with you afterwards if we have that contact information. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and share my screen here. So just a disclaimer, I am not an attorney, and the information that I will be presenting today are the principles and practices of parliamentary procedure and board conduct. So because I'm not an attorney, nothing in this presentation constitutes legal advice. Just got to put that out there. We're going to start this evening talking about board conduct. So what comes to mind when you think about good board conduct? Some of you may have been on boards before. Some of you may not have been on boards before. Maybe the school board is the first time you've really expressed interest on being on a board, but perhaps you've seen other board, maybe you've seen school board meetings for Anchorage on TV or assembly meetings, or even the legislature when you look at them meeting. What are some traits that you think of when you think of good board conduct? Usually when I do this training in smaller groups, we hear things like respect for one another, teamwork, commitment to the mission, following the procedures and policies of an organization, the bylaws of an organization, commitment, passion. They're generally the really positive words that you hear when you start thinking about what good board conduct means. So when we talk about conduct, what is it? It's the manner in which a person behaves, especially on a particular occasion or context. So board conduct is how people are behaving when they're participating in the school board meeting. And what we really hope for is that everybody comes to the meeting and behaves on their best behavior. And we know that when it comes to board conduct, it's always about relationships. Anytime you interact with people, relationships are always evolving, and you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So it's important to remember that it's not about you. And your relationship is only going to be as good as the last communication that you had, whether it's with your fellow board members or with the superintendent or with a staff member. If you're really working hard at these relationships and trying to be positive, then your relationships are going to grow. But once you have maybe a testing communication with somebody, whether it's in person or email, however, then your relationship will suffer a little bit. So you have to think about, how do you be proactive in building those relationships up? Because the relationship you have as a school board member with the rest of the board and the superintendent will impact the students in the district. Board conduct is also a part of board standards. So about 30 years ago, the Association of Alaska School Boards started looking at the landscape of education, and we know that our superintendents have standards that they have to operate under. Our teaching professionals have standards they operate under, and as the governing body of the school board, we know that school board members also have standards that they should abide by to be effective in their work as the governing board. So for more information on these board standards, we have this on our website, and it's aasb.org/board-standards if you want to check out some more in-depth information about board standards. But you'll see that we have vision. There's 5 board standards: vision, structure, accountability, advocacy, conduct, and ethics. And so that conduct and ethics is really what we're focusing on in this conversation tonight. So when you're conducting yourself with the board, remember that you're responsible for yourself. So you can't really control what anybody else is doing, but you can control how you react to things. So I love this. I'm a coffee drinker. I know that me without coffee, I could be a little grouchy, but with coffee, I'm a little bit more peppy, more prepared. So when you're getting ready to attend a school board meeting, are you setting yourself up for success to have a good meeting, to interact well with your fellow school board members, with the superintendent, and doing everything that you can to put yourself in a good space? I know that we've had more people join the webinar, so just a reminder, if you have any questions, we have that Q&A box or button at the bottom. If you put questions in there, I will try to address them in a timely manner. So we have the roles and responsibilities. AASB has also developed a booklet that talks about the various roles and responsibilities, both of the school board and the superintendent. And this is also available on our website. I don't remember the URL off the top of my head, but I can certainly share that afterwards. And you'll see when we get to the roles and responsibilities the booklet covers a lot of different things. It covers personnel, community engagement, students, curriculum. Meetings is one of the areas that's touched on in this booklet. And you'll see under meetings that part of this covers the board will meet together to transact all business of the district and establish through policy the operational procedures for maintaining control of the board. So we're through that, the policy, most school districts in the state of Alaska, Anchorage included, has their bylaws in the 9,000s of their policy manual. In the 9,000s is the board's, I'm sorry, the words just failed me. Conduct and ethics. There's a bylaw on conduct and ethics and how board members are expected to be professional. I really recommend, it's not a really long section of the policy manual. I'm a policy geek. I love policy. I will say that 90% of the questions that we get from every day, we get questions from school board members, superintendents, staff, the public, like 90% of them, I say, well, let's check the policy manual, and we get answers there. But especially if you're a candidate of the school board, The bylaws of the board is a fairly short section of the policy manual. It might take you 30 minutes to read through them. Take the time, even as an experienced board member, as somebody that works with this every single day, every time I take time to really read through the bylaws, even I'm reminded like, oh, yep, that's something that's a role of the school board, or that's something I should be doing, or I kind of forgot that's the way that function works. So taking the time to read those bylaws in the 9,000s will be really beneficial to identifying what's expected of you as a school board member. This is what hey, look, I was really good. I forgot what I put in the slideshow. So this is the URL to the roles and responsibilities booklet. It's maybe 12 pages long. It's pretty short, but it hits those highlights on what your responsibilities as a school board member would be in the various areas within the district. So that's a lot on school board conduct pretty quick. We're going to jump now to Robert's rules, and I'll just say, if you are just joining us and you have questions about conduct, the Q&A function, you could use that. I can hop back if I need to, but Robert's rules, we get questions on Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure every week. So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to go kind of in chronological order of how things go in meetings. So one of the first things that we have to think about when we have a meeting is quorum. And what is a quorum? A quorum is the minimum number of voting members who must be present for business to be done. So if you have a board of 7, your quorum is probably 4. So it's more than half of the board. And a quorum is different from the number of votes cast. So when going through the bylaws, you'll see that if your board, for motions to pass, whether your board has stated in its bylaws that it's a majority vote or a majority of members that are eligible to vote. I can't remember how that wording actually goes, but the difference is if it's just a simple majority and you have 7 members, you need, if you have 5 people that show up to the meeting and 2 couldn't, you need 3 people to pass a motion. But if it's and this is more into motions instead of quorum, I'm just kind of explaining the difference. But if to pass a motion, you need a majority of eligible members and you have 7 members and only 5 people show up, you still need 4 votes in the affirmative to pass that motion, even though a 3 would be a simple majority of members present. So if you lose a quorum, you can't conduct business. I've been in meetings where for one reason or another, we've started the meeting, we had a quorum, and you lose a quorum for any reason, and the chair will usually say something along the lines of, at this point, we're going to recess the meeting for lack of a quorum, or that we've lost a quorum. So the board can't take any action without quorum. You're gonna see, I love memes. So I try to pepper them through. I think they're fun. They keep people's attention. I hope you like them. We warn people, this was something that I was not aware of when I first joined the school board, of what a walking quorum was, or a serial meeting. So Open Meetings Act is something that public governing bodies need to abide by. It's a law for the state of Alaska, and it talks about how the business of the governing body needs to be conducted in public. And what a walking quorum or serial meeting is when members of that governing body, so in this case, members of the school board, are talking to one another, whether it's in person or on the phone or texting or emailing outside of a public meeting. Then if you have a quorum, the Open Meetings Act is pretty specific about this. If you have a board of 5, it's 3. And if you have a board larger than that, it's more than 3 for a walking quorum or serial meeting. And what that means is, so if I'm a school board member and Bob is on the school board with me, and Sarah is on the school board with me, and and Willow is on the school board with us. There's 4 of us, and we have more board members. But say I'm talking to Bob about an issue, and I just think, hey, Bob, I want to talk to you about this school board issue. And okay, we finish that conversation. Well, then if Bob goes and talks to Sarah and they talk about the issue, and then Sarah talks to Willow, or maybe Bob talks to Willow, all of a sudden the 4 of us have violated the Open Meetings Act because we're talking about school board business outside of a public meeting. And I don't even know that Sarah or Willow have been talked to. I thought it was just between Bob and I, but that doesn't matter. I'm part of that violation of the Open Meetings Act through a walking quorum or a serial meeting. Where people can get into trouble with this is via email. We recommend that no business be transacted via email between school board members. The only thing that can be really discussed outside of that meeting is logistics of a meeting, so date, time, location. So if the board chair is trying to figure out what's a good time or location or date for a meeting, that's fine. But anything beyond that should not be discussed outside of a meeting. And you can talk to other people as long as the number is less than a quorum. So if I'm talking to Bob, I'm saying, we don't want to violate Open Meetings Act, so don't talk about this with anybody else. Or if Bob talks to Sarah, he's like, Sarah, I have already talked to Tiffany about this, so that's 3 of us. We cannot talk to any other board member about this without violating the Open Meetings Act. Just to be on the up and up, this really gets to the board conduct and the conduct and ethics of the board. You really want to be viewed as somebody that's operating ethically. So if there is school board business that need to be discussed between specific board or individual board members, do it in a meeting. Contact the board president, follow the procedure set out in the bylaws for getting an item on the agenda so that it could be discussed appropriately in a duly convened meeting of the board. So that leads us to agendas and how agendas are developed. It's in your bylaws for the Anchorage School District in the 9000s. It's generally prepared by leadership, but it's within the control of the board. So it's subject to notice requirements, of course, with the Open Meetings Act. Robert's Rules does not require that the agenda be adopted. You'll probably, if you've been to any meetings of boards, you've probably seen that people move to approve the agenda or move to amend the agenda. It's not required to adopt the agenda. However, if later in the meeting you want to change the agenda or change the order in which things are done, it requires a 2/3 vote to change the agenda later in the meeting. That is required if you want to change it. Excuse me. You also do not need to include approval of agenda or other minor procedural motions like in the minutes. Your minutes are probably action minutes. The Association of Alaska School Boards encourages school districts to utilize action minutes, which are just records of the action that has been taken by the governmental agency. A question on agendas that we've received a lot in the last, I want to say 4 to 6 months, has been regarding adding items to the agenda. And this is not a Robert's Rules issue, but more of an Open Meetings Act issue. Sometimes you get to a board meeting, you may have seen that people want to add an item to the agenda at the meeting. And in a private business, whatever, that's fine. They can operate however they want to within their bylaws. For governmental entities subject to the Open Meetings Act, an item can be added to the agenda for discussion at the meeting. We strongly urge boards not to add action items to the agenda at the meeting. The reason for that is part of the notice requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And if you add an action item at the meeting, then your public hasn't had reasonable notice of that action item being taken up by the governmental entity. So You might be able to talk about it, but don't take action on it. If there's something that comes up, work with the chair and the superintendent to get that item on the agenda for the next meeting. So again, not a Robert's Rules issue, more of an Open Meetings Act issue. We often get questions about the difference between a regular agenda and a consent agenda. A consent agenda is something that's used to really expedite the business of the board. It follows your order of business, and it can include, so when I say expedite the business of the board, you might have a number of things that fit on the consent agenda. Perhaps the superintendent's report, or athletics director's report, or recognitions, communications. Anything that's on the consent agenda should be non-controversial, routine approval of the minutes, things like that, that require board action to approve, but don't typically require a lot of conversation and discussion. So when all those things are under one item of the consent agenda, then all you need is one motion to approve the adopt or move to adopt the consent agenda. Once that's seconded and passed, everything that's under that consent agenda is then approved. Now, they're not again, those items are not expected to be controversial. If a member requests, any member, doesn't have to be the president, if any member of the governing body requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda, that's done. There's no debate about that. They can say, hey, I want to pull that for discussion. That item is then either placed right after the consent agenda or at its proper place further on in the regular agenda. And that can't be discussed. You don't discuss anything on the consent agenda with Robert's Rules. The whole point is to expedite the business of the board. And I don't know if you saw back here on my slide before that nothing is intended to be hidden in the consent agenda. It's just a way to get through a lot of business that is not controversial. Unanimous consent. This is another form of expediting the business of the board. This is probably less common right now because of a requirement of the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act says that if you have even one member of the board that's attending via teleconference, virtually, Zoom, otherwise, that all votes must be roll call votes. So you might, if you have a 7-person board, 6 people are all in the room together, but one person's on the phone or on video, all votes of the board need to be roll call votes. However, if you're all in the same room together, unanimous consent can be used to expedite the work of the board. It's very efficient for minor procedural matters, like approval of the consent agenda. The president of the board should probably say something like, if you agree with the vote, remain silent. Silent is equal to consent. If you disagree with the motion, you're going to say object. And if the president or whoever is presiding over the meeting knows that there is not going to be unanimous consent on a motion, they shouldn't use unanimous consent to do that. They should just use a regular way of processing votes to get the feel of the board. A language tip for anybody that is presiding over meetings where everybody's present, and utilizing unanimous consent. So once you have a motion on the floor, there's been discussion, you're ready to vote, the president may say, without objection, or the motion on the floor is to approve the consent agenda. Without objection, and wait to hear if there's objection. If there is, and they go back to regular voting. Or if there's no objection, wait to hear if there's any objection from the members of the board. If there's no objection, the motion carries, and proceeding with the rest, the vote. So moving on, give me just a moment. I'm going to take a sip of my Pepsi here. The purpose of the minutes. So I talked a little bit earlier about the purpose of the minutes. I have seen governmental bodies in the state where they have these really long minutes. They're so long, and the board secretary is trying to type down everything everybody says. According to Robert's rules, the purpose of the minutes is just to record the action taken by the body. So it is a record of what is done, not of what is said. So you'll have member A made a motion to approve the consent agenda. Member B seconded the motion to approve that. And then however the vote came for that. You're not gonna have anything like member A made the motion to adopt the financial report, member B seconded, A said this, B said that, and that is not how you do minutes in according to Robert's rules. It's just motion, second, how the vote came out, what was done. It's a bad idea to have a record of everything that was said in your minutes. One, it just doesn't honor the fundamental purpose of minutes. It can create a liability for organizations, school districts, even individuals. In the case of lawsuits, they tend to, when you have those he said, she said dialogues in minutes, they tend to personalize the business of the board and politicize discussions, and you don't want that to happen. School boards are nonpartisan bodies. It can intimidate people from speaking freely if they know that every little thing they say is going to be memorialized in the minutes. I mean, we want people to be able to speak freely. These are meetings that are held in public. But we don't want people to be intimidated by knowing that every word they're saying is being recorded. And it really absorbs so much time. I know I was working with one board that went from the detailed he said, she said minutes to action minutes like Robert's rules talks about. And the staff went, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This has saved us so much time. This is wonderful. They really appreciated the board moving in that direction. And when you have those he said, she said minutes, it makes it really hard to really nail in on the action of the board. So later, and I have worked for boards in my professional career, even before I come to work for the Association of Alaska School Boards, there have been times where I went, I think about 5 years ago, the board acted on this. Can we pull the minutes and find that? And we were able to do that in that organization. But if you have these really long minutes like this, it makes it really difficult to find those actual actions of the board. So Robert's rule says just record your actions. That's our recommendation. Now, this is my favorite rule in Robert's rules, the principle of equity, that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. And what does that mean? That in a discussion in a board meeting, we're going to get to that favorite part of the rule. The key point is that you're having a debate. It's not a conversation. It's not a back and forth. Everything should be pinged through the president. So if somebody has a comment that they want to make, they're going to raise their hand. They're going to wait to be recognized and follow the rules of debate. Because this is that rule that I love, the equity rule. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. Now, this puts a really heavy lift on the president of the board because they're the ones that are recognizing everybody that wants to speak during the meeting. And if you have a motion on the floor, I like to use my examples for the most part, things that are really non-controversial. So if you ever do trainings with me, you probably hear I have a motion to paint the walls blue. So there's a motion to paint the walls blue and somebody seconds it. And that's the motion on the floor. As a motion maker, I could speak to it first and somebody speaks second. So if you have a 7-person board and 3 people have spoken to the motion to paint the walls blue, and that first person that spoke wants to speak again, what the president needs to do is say, member 1, I see your hand up that you would like to be recognized again. However, these 4 members or these 3 members haven't spoken yet. Would any of you like the opportunity to speak? they could take the opportunity or not. Some may say, yes, I have this is my comment. Some may say, I don't want to comment, or I don't have a comment right now. In which case, after they've had the opportunity, you could go back and start calling people again. But it's a rule of equity. Nobody can speak twice until everybody's had the opportunity to speak once. That's just making sure that everybody has the same opportunity to be involved in the governing of the board. Now, why do boards sometimes not follow this rule? It's really easy to get sucked into conversational mode. We talk to one another every day. We are used to in our lives just having conversations with people. It's really, natural to turn to somebody and ask a question that's sitting next to you. But we really, as elected officials, need to work on training ourselves to ping all of our comments through the president, because people who dominate conversations are going to dominate conversations, and the people who are agreeable are going to let them dominate conversations. So this is the structure that we have in place with Robert's Rules that ensures that everybody has the equal opportunity to participate and be fair and efficient and effective in the work that we do as school boards. Point of order. So point of order is when another member, if somebody breaks the rules, violates Robert's Rules, a member of the governing board can make a point of order. The chair rules on the point, and according to Robert's Rules, it can only be made by a member. Now, we've had some school boards ask about, well, can our superintendent call a point of order? Most bylaws for school districts say that the superintendent is an ex officio member of the board. So they don't get to vote or anything, but they're there to ensure that the board keeps itself out of trouble. So if things pop up, the superintendent, we've seen, typically can call a point of order. We also recommend authorizing key staff to do that. In some districts, they ask the board secretary to be the parliamentarian, and authorize them to be able to call a point of order as well. The public may not call point of order. That is not a role of the public. Your school board meetings are meetings that are held in public. They are not public meetings. So the difference, I always get questions about that. Well, what's the difference? A meeting that is held in public, that's a meeting where the public has a right to attend, to have an opportunity to provide comments. So that's why you see public comment on many agendas. But after that's passed, they're in the audience watching the governing of the board occur. A public meeting, that's like when you have a town hall and everybody has the opportunity to speak. That is not a school board meeting. School board meetings are meetings that are held in public, so they can watch the governing happen, but they can't participate in it other than public comment. Point of order is the one time, according to Robert's Rules, that a member can interrupt the speaker if it's necessary. It must be made timely, and it must be made at the time of offense. So what does that mean? There are things that we're not allowed to do as elected officials. One of them is talking about this is an open meeting. You'll notice that a lot of Robert's Rules and Open Meetings Act conversation kind of happen in tandem when we work with boards, because they're like two sets of rules that we have to weave together to operate under. The Open Meetings Act says that executive session, so that's an executive session is when the board can have a private conversation without the public present. And one thing that they could do is have an executive session to discuss any matter or any matter regarding an individual which may prejudice their reputation or character. So if they're going to talk about we can't just allow the staff to be talked about during meetings. That's a violation of the Open Meetings Act and their rights. So if somebody starts talking about staff, whether it's public comment or within the meeting, a member can say point of order. This is a violation of whatever. There's actually a whole process to processing a point of order. The chair would, somebody would say point of order, the chair would say state your point. The member that called the point of order would say this is a violation of this rule. The chair would then rule the point is well received. The member will refrain from these comments or stop talking about this individual, however the whatever the point is that was raised. We do warn not to weaponize point of order. So even though you can interrupt with point of order, and sometimes you have to, it's usually not necessary to interrupt. And if possible, you should refrain from doing that. Germaneness, so somebody being off topic is not appropriate to call a point of order for that. And when you call a point of order, it does not count against you. So we get back to that golden rule. Nobody can speak twice until everybody's had an opportunity to speak once. It doesn't count against you for that. So even if you haven't spoken, you're not using your time to speak by calling a point of order. And once the chair has ruled on the point of order, the only allowable form of discussion is to appeal the ruling. This is what I've talked about a little bit already, is members who want to speak must seek recognition from the presider before speaking. And that's what we're talking about, pinging all conversation through the president and or whoever's presiding over the meeting at the time, raising your hand, waiting to be recognized, however the board seeks recognition from the president to speak. We do this because it depoliticizes a lot of it, the conversation, and makes things not personal. If you get into those really conversational debates, then all of a sudden it's Tiffany and Bob going at it against one another during the meeting. But when you have to ping through the president each time, one, the president can say, Tiffany, you've already spoken, Bob, you've already spoken. It's these other 5 people have the opportunity to speak before you speak again. And it prevents that really nitpicking at one another during the meeting. So we are in an environment where we have meetings that are virtual. A lot of us have been in a ton of Zoom meetings. I think this is my 6th Zoom meeting today or webinar. So we're becoming very proficient in that. There are functions in the virtual meetings to raise your hand. So just because you're virtual does not mean that you shouldn't seek recognition through the chair to speak. When you haven't been recognized by the chair, Robert's rules states that you have a duty to remain silent. If the floor is not yours, the chair hasn't recognized you to speak, the only time that you should be speaking if you haven't been recognized by the chair is to call a point of order, if it's essential. Are we having fun yet? It's a lot to digest, Robert's rules. So I like to spice it up with my little raccoon friends. Now we're going to get to the meat of things and making motions. And this is where the action happens with the board. So just an overview of what that looks like. A member makes a motion, another member seconds the motion. The chair states the official language for the motion, and then the fun begins. Now, the reason I have official on this slide in all caps is because a member member A may say, I move to paint the walls sky blue. Member B, I second the motion. The chair may state, there's a motion on the floor to paint the walls royal blue. And there's a difference there. The motion was sky blue. The chair said royal blue. The language the chair uses is the official language of the motion. So the maker of the motion really needs to listen to what the chair states so that if necessary, in that case, they would say, Madam Chair, the motion was actually to paint the walls sky blue, not royal blue. And then the chair could restate it for the official language. Once that motion is on the floor, that's when the fun really starts. If it's at all possible, Robert's rules suggest putting motions in writing, especially if they're a little bit lengthy. They should be clear and not ambiguous. Don't say I've seen a lot of boards, not just local boards or small boards. I've seen professional boards where people say, so moved. And that is not a motion. That is, according to Robert's rules, you can't say so moved. It's ambiguous. It doesn't really state what the motion is. So you might be talking about one thing, somebody might say so moved, and for all we know that the motion is to buy Charmin instead of whatever brand of toilet paper. So it needs to be very clear what the motion is. Motions must be in the grammatical positive. So we're going to have a motion to paint the walls sky blue. You would not phrase that, make a motion not to paint the walls royal blue. It needs to be in the grammatical positive. And they still have to comply with the board's bylaws and any procedures of the board or the state, the law, the laws. And you can only have one main motion at a time. So we're going to get into some of the more intricate amendments and amendments to the amendments, but as far as main motions, you're only allowed to have one main motion at a time. It's totally appropriate in Robert's rules to ask the chair, may I have a few minutes to write the motion down? The chair may also request that a motion be written down if they feel like it's lengthy or they want to make sure that there's clarity in what the motion is. You can use 3-part motion forms or however it works for your board. If it's okay, just my point is, it's okay to ask for the time to write the motion down. Second the motion, all motions require a second. By seconding a motion, all you're doing is saying that, yes, I would like to talk about this. You're not saying I agree with the motion. You're not saying you're going to vote in favor of the motion. You're just saying this is something that I would like to talk about. And it's one time where you don't need to be recognized by the chair. So the maker of the motion needs to be recognized so they can make it. But once that motion is made, somebody else can just say, I second. Your board chair or whoever's keeping minutes for the board would probably like and request that the board chair recognize that person for the minute's sake, being able to record who made the motion in the second. But just know that it's not required to seek recognition. The chair should let the board secretary know who made the second, though, for a minute's sake. And then this third bullet is just saying it's okay to second a motion that you disagree with just for the sake of conversation. If there's no second, the chair can say there being no second, the motion will not be considered, and then move immediately to the next item of business. There is a old video. It's not from Alaska. It's not from a school board. I think if you Google on YouTube or do a search on YouTube for most outrageous governmental meeting, there's an example of a motion on the floor that doesn't receive a second and the chair refuses to acknowledge. It's just, we're not going to show it now because it's like 10 minutes long. But if you want to see what not to do, YouTube, world's most outrageous governmental meeting, for what not to do. So the maker of the motion cannot speak against their motion. So once you've made a motion, I've made a motion to paint the walls sky blue. It's been seconded. As the maker, I have the right to speak first. The chair says, okay, Tiffany, as a maker of the motion, would you like to speak first? I can state my point. It's totally possible that once the board has debated the issue, my mind has been changed. Maybe the motion has been amended. Maybe I've just changed my mind, but I can't say, I can't ask to be recognized and say, hey, I've changed my mind. I don't support the motion anymore. That the maker of the motion is the only person that's limited from doing that. The seconder can, anybody else can, but as the maker, I cannot speak against the motion. What the easiest thing to do is just to vote against the motion. The maker can, you can vote against your motion. You just can't speak against it. So we're still gonna be, these are really key steps to know as we move into amendments. The 8 steps to processing a motion. Again, member makes a motion, another member seconds it. The chair states the official language of the motion, so listen to that. The members of the board debate the motion, making sure to ping through the president to be recognized, and following that golden rule that nobody gets to speak twice and tell everybody's had the opportunity to speak once. After that, and we're going to get into this process a little bit more, the chair is going to restate the motion. So there's a number of times where the chair is restating this motion. The motion, you want to make sure that everybody's clear of the motion by the time there's a vote. The members vote, the chair states the results, whether the motion passes or fails, what happens next, and then goes on to the next item of business. So on other points on voting, we talked a little bit earlier about unanimous consent. So a little bit different. So if we're not using unanimous consent, if the chair says, all those in favor, please say aye. And it looks like it's obvious that everybody has said aye, and the motion is going to carry with everybody voting in the affirmative. The chair still has to ask, okay, everybody opposed, please say nay. Even when it's obvious that everybody voted one way, the chair still has to ask for the negative vote. According to Robert's rules, a tie vote fails. We've had this question a few times in the past year. Well, what's the tie-breaking procedures? There is no tie-breaking procedures. Your board says that you follow Robert's rules. If it's a tie vote, the motion fails. Under Robert's rules, if you abstain from a vote, it means you took no action. We discourage people from abstaining. There's very rarely a good reason for abstaining and not taking action. You have been elected to, or if you're elected to the school board, you're elected to represent your constituents and take action on governmental issues. The most appropriate thing, if there's a conflict of interest, is recusal, at which point the member would say, probably check with the attorney, declare a conflict of interest, and at the vote say, I recuse myself because whatever reason. When I was on the school board, my sister was a teacher, so I would recuse myself from votes on her personnel contract because there was a conflict of interest. But also, that it gets a little funny with that too, because it's up to the board that if I have declared this individual is my sister, I've been on the board, for how many years I was on my board. There were years where I said, I need to declare a conflict of interest. My sister is on staff. We're talking about contracts. Some boards said, this person is not in your household. You haven't lived together for 20 years. Their finances don't affect your finances. Thank you for declaring it. We don't see a problem with it. And the board would like you to vote. Fine. Other years, it's all, yep, it's conflict of interest. We appreciate your recusal and not voting. So it ultimately can become the decision of the board on that. So once we have a motion on the floor, it's been seconded, we're starting debate. There are 4 ways to amend the motion. The goal of amendments is to get you to the most perfect motion possible. So you can amend a motion by adding a word or inserting a word. Maybe you want to strike a word out or strike out words and insert words in their place, or substitute a motion, which that's really tricky. I honestly, myself, I've never been in a position where the substitute motion has really successfully been made. It's generally easier to add words, strike words, or even vote things down and do something different. So an example being, the motion to paint the wall sky blue, somebody may make, I move to amend the motion to strike sky and insert royal. So the motion would read, motion to paint the word or the walls royal blue. Friendly amendment. I have heard this, I don't know how many times, but there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. Sometimes when we're thinking about amendments to motions, somebody's like, well, I made the motion, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to the motion. And it's, my bullet says that people use it the wrong way, and that's because there is no right way. It doesn't exist. Once you have a motion and a second on the floor, that motion doesn't belong to the maker of the motion anymore. It belongs to the board as a whole. So that individual does not have any right to just make a friendly amendment and change the motion that's before the board. If they want to make an amendment, it needs to go through the full amendment process, which, as we see here, is the same 8 steps as we saw for a main motion to change it. So I would like to make a motion to amend, or I would like to move to amend by doing XYZ. And then it requires a second to process amendments. This is one that I see misused all the time. Lots of boards get into debates that just go on and on and on. And maybe you've witnessed meetings or participated in meetings where it seems like the debate's going on a long time, and somebody says, I call the question, and then they're like, the question's been called, we have to vote. No, that's not the way calling the question actually works. Calling the question in Robert's rules is actually a form of a motion. So it does require a second. So if we're debating whether to paint the walls sky blue or not, and the debate's going on for a while, and somebody says, I call the question, the equivalent of that, Robert, it used to be that you had to say, I move to call the question. Robert's rules, the newer editions, now recognize saying call the question as the statement of the motion, but it requires another member to say, I second that. So if somebody calls the question and nobody seconds it, the chair may say there's a motion to call the question. Is there a second? If there's not, the debate continues. If there is a second to the motion to call the question, that motion to call the question cannot be debated. So you're going to automatically vote on whether to call the question. So what calling the question actually means is that it's a motion to end debate. And because it's a motion to end debate and a motion to limit the rights of other board members, I mean, you may have board members that want to continue debating the issue. And if you end debate, you're taking away their right to do that. It requires a 2/3 vote to pass. So you have a motion to call the question, a second, you vote on it. If 2/3 vote to, so let's see, a board of 7. So what is that? 0.66 of 7. So you would need 5 people on a board of 7 to vote in favor of a motion to call the question and end debate. If you get that 5 votes, if the motion to end debate passes, then debate has formally ended, and the chair would then go, okay, the motion to call the question has passed with a 2/3, greater than a 2/3 vote. We will now vote on the motion. If the vote to call the question does not receive a 2/3 vote, so say only 4 people voted on the motion to call the question, the chair would state, the motion to call the question has failed. It has not received greater than a 2/3 vote. The debate remains open on the motion, and then you would just proceed with the motion as is. So 2/3 vote, it's 2/3 of the voting members. So if you only had 6 people present in that meeting for whatever reason out of a 7-member board, you still need 2/3 of those voting members. So you would still need 5 people out of the 6 present. It's different from a simple majority, would just mean 4. And again, that's because Robert's rules specifies that anytime you're limiting the rights of a member of the governing board, it requires a 2/3 vote. So a process to call the question. Here is just an example, a script. Somebody says, I call the question, another member seconds. The chair would state the question has been called. So we will vote immediately on whether to end debate and vote on the pending motion, which is to paint the walls blue. All those in favor of stopping debate now, please raise your hand. and then the members would vote. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you, hands down. There is a 2/3 vote in favor of ending debate, so we will vote immediately, or there's not a 2/3 vote in favor of ending debate, so discussion will continue. Personal remarks. So the whole point of Robert's Rules is to provide an orderly way of effectively holding meetings. And it's key to remember that when you're debating issues, that you are debating the measure, you're debating the motion, you're not debating the member. So if I made a motion to paint the wall sky blue and Bob did not agree with me, I'm not going to be debating Bob on the issue, like, Bob, why are you like this? But my statements are going to be regarding, I support the motion because. It's not going to be anything like, Bob, why are you saying that? It's key to remember, you're debating the motion, the measure, not the individual. And here are some really great resources. We rely on Jurassic Parliament all the time. So it's a great free resource online, jurassicparliament.com. Anne McFarlane is, she's the brain behind Jurassic Parliament. She has written this book, Mastering Council Meetings. It's like parliamentary procedure and made so a fourth grader can understand. I have a copy of this book. When I was chairing meetings, I kept it by me because all your most common things that come up as far as Robert's Rules questions are in this book. Excuse me. And so it's a really great resource, a quick kind of like how-to on Robert's Rules. If you know Robert's Rules, you see I think it's up to the 12th edition right now. The book itself is really thick. So this is a really great primer for the most common instances that you'll run into with Robert's Rules. And on the JurassicParliament.com website, there is a free blog. So about once a week, she sends out great articles on things that pop up in Robert's Rules, and sometimes they're really applicable to school boards. Generally, sometimes they're just more general, like governing boards in general, but she has some things that are really specific to school boards, some resources for school boards. My email is also on here. So like I said, at AASB, we get questions every single day from school board members, from superintendents, staff, the public. Feel free to contact me if you have questions about school board like policies. I am the policy geek for AASB. Various questions regarding school board service. We have also on our AASB website, we have Ask AASB, and the link is there as well. That we try to add some of the really common questions that we get, and sometimes it's really specific to school boards, sometimes it's more parliamentary procedure. We did an article or a little Q&A on consent agendas last year because that was coming up a lot. So that can be found in our Ask AASB. And I have here, if there's any questions, I have been monitoring the Q&A. I know I talk really fast. I was worried that I wasn't going to have enough time to get all this information to you all. And really, we could spend way more time covering Robert's Rules. This is more of an introductory to Robert's Rules for people that are considering serving on the school board. So you kind of know what you're getting into when you, if you're successful in your election to the board, because it's different from our conversational, casual interactions with one another. The governing board, people aren't used to having to ping, being recognized every time they want to speak and getting pinged through the president every time. So I'm at the point where I could take questions in the Q&A if anybody has any. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but I'm here for you all. I can hang out for a little bit and answer any questions that go into the Q&A. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. There we go. Sometimes it takes a little while to type, so I'm gonna wait a few minutes just in case people are typing anything in. I feel like I should have the Jeopardy music going. Da, 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 da. Or elevator music. Just waiting to see if there's any Q&A. Well, it doesn't look like, I'm shocked. You know, usually I get lots more questions about point of order and calling the question and friendly amendments. Again, you have my email address. You can contact me by email, call AASB if you have any questions. We're here to serve. Katie, do you have anything to wrap us up? Or
no, I think that was great. Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Thank you. So really appreciate everybody that was able to join us this evening. I hope you leave with a little bit more knowledge in your brain, and that this was helpful when you start thinking about what it takes to conduct yourself as a school board member and what to expect when it comes to Robert's Rules and Parliamentary Procedure within a school board meeting. I really appreciated being invited to come help present this information to you this evening, and hope you all have a good rest of the night. I'm giving you back 27 more minutes of your evening. We're ending a little bit early.